Today's topic, St. Louis Speak Your Mind on Community Policing. Tonight's guest will include Mr. Ronald Hampton, retired DC-MPD Community Relations Police Officer in Washington, D.C. Officer Donald Walters, President of Ethical Society of Police, St. Louis, Missouri. Officer Sean James Jr., Vice President of Ethical Society of Police, St. Louis, Missouri. And Shanette Hall, Administrative Manager for Ethical Society of Police, St. Louis, Missouri.
Right. Good evening. I'm so used to doing the show in the afternoons or Saturday mornings. Good evening, Real STL News family, as well as our family on the Justice Beat Show page. Thank you so much for joining us for a special evening broadcast in which we're going to be discussing how to reduce the footprint of the police in your communities, in our communities. And today we have some very, very distinguished guests from the St. Louis area who are representatives of the Ethical Society of Police here. Our first guest is Sergeant Donnie Walters, who is the president of the Ethical Society of Police. We have Officer Sean James, who is the vice president of the Ethical Society of Police. And we have with us Officer Shanette Hall, who is the administrative manager for the Ethical Society of Police. We will also have joining us Mr. Ron Hampton, who is a retired community relations officer, police officer from Washington, D.C. Many of you may already be aware that he joined us a few Saturdays ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, when we discussed some other police-related issues. And that is what kind of sparked this follow-up show, is really wanting to begin to look at more deeply the St. Louis area and how we could probably as a community impact and spark change in St. Louis around the footprint of the police in some communities. So until Officer Hampton joins us, I want us to first talk a little bit about, and I'm going to kind of give an overview about why this is so important. Give us a little background for some of those who may be joining us for the first time and not familiar with the ESOP, about what the ESOP does in the community and your role. Sergeant Walters.
Yes, ma'am. I am the newly elected president of the Ethical Society of Police, following in the great footsteps of retired Sergeant Heather Taylor, who really paved a way for us to do more community outreach. I can go on and on about all the great things that she's done within the community, fighting for just equality and justice. And that's the biggest thing, both here in the city and assisting Shanette in the county. And the main thing that we do with the Ethical Society of Police is work on bridging that gap between the police department and the community, as well as pretty much holding police departments accountable is the biggest thing, holding them accountable for their actions when it comes to our minority police officers, as well as our women police officers. And I stress that because we have a lot of women police officers out here that, you know, they get overlooked for a lot of things, and they're part of this minority-based agenda that we have. And Sean can add to it as well as Shanette, because Shanette's going to give you a different viewpoint from the county. So Sean.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, Ethical Society of Police was started due to the fact that the racial injustice that was happening within the St. Louis Police Department back in 1968, I believe. So that's why we were founded. We want the minority police officers were not given the same discipline or same preferences as non-minority officers. So that's one of the main reasons why Ethical started.
Okay, great. Shanette?
Yeah, so just to even mirror off of Donnie here and Sean, like they both stated, the Ethical Society was started for a reason. Like I said, to fight race-based discrimination that was occurring not only within the police departments, that was also occurring within our communities as well too. It started in St. Louis City, and here recently, up to about 2.5 years ago, we expanded out into St. Louis County. Many people, when they look at urban areas and they see St. Louis City or other urban areas across the country, they think this is where the bad practices and patterns exist within urban police departments, and that's simply not true. We have a bad way of culture and policing that exists all throughout the country. And so with the Ethical Society, as we've come along and we fought these injustices, as Sean has mentioned, in the police department, we fight it tirelessly as it exists within our communities as well too. This is something that has to be done. I think one of the things that we've been seen for as a little bit more now frequently is and on things that you won't see other people speak up. As much as I like to say it, we call a spade, and that's one thing that Sergeant Heather Taylor has done amazingly, and we'll continue to do that now with our new president, Sergeant Walters, and the rest of our board members. The Ethical Society will always stand up. We will speak up. We will say those tough things that other people are afraid to say, even the chiefs, the politicians, whomever. You can always bet your bottom dollar the Ethical Society will be there to say those things.
Okay. I'm curious to know, so ESOP, do you all have a membership base? Is the membership only for officers, or are you supported by people in the community?
We have commissioned police officers, we have civilians, we have park rangers, we have city marshals. Here recently, I just got an email from the superintendent of corrections, and he has sparked an interest for the correctional officers. We have the St. Louis Airport Police. We've had departments as far as San Diego reach out to us, Chicago. Just recently, we had a Zoom meeting with a citizen in Columbia, Missouri, that feels as though the Ethical Society of Police will be good in their community. So we're growing. And St. Louis County, which is our brother sister department, they're growing. And we've got our former president, the now chief, Eddie Simmons. Okay. We're looking to branch into other chapters in other departments.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm really shocked about corrections. The interest from corrections.
Yes, it was a shock to me when I got the email. So we're growing, and we work with a few community-based organization like Mama Cat and the Pot Bangers. Okay. We work with, matter of fact, I just had a long conversation with her last night with the events that's coming up, and you'll see more of us involved with what she has going on coming up in the immediate future.
Okay, good. So let's move into some of this discussion about why we're here. One of the things that I know Ron wanted to talk about, and we talked about kind of offline over the last couple of weeks, is finding ways to reduce the footprint of police in communities in St. Louis. And what sparked that conversation had to do with, we were discussing the Walter Wallace situation, the man that was killed in Philadelphia. He had the mental health, I don't know how many more times we have to see someone who has a mental health crisis or episode be killed when the family member simply calls and says, we need help. And the police are being sent into these situations and not really familiar with and or have been trained in how to de-escalate those situations. And so that's just one example. But what we wanted to do was to share with the listening audience some numbers and statistics so they can get a clear picture about why people are calling the police. And I think they're going to be pretty shocked at some of the numbers, because the thing that we want to be able to do is look at those numbers and determine from that point, what kind of assessments need to be made in the community to find out where alternative resources may lie, so that people in the community are not calling the police unnecessarily, where perhaps another community resource could be called, and reducing that interaction that could be best served by someone else in the community through social services or community-based organizations. So I want to introduce District 1. And if someone, hang on a second. I think Ron is joining us. Okay, he's coming.
Yeah, how are you?
Good evening, Mr. Hampton. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's finally working. I got the whole thing and put it in there. It wasn't working right.
Okay, it's okay. It's okay. You're actually right on time, because I was about to take your spot.
Okay.
So now you can give, I want to be able to have you give the perspective about why we're here, what we hope to accomplish, and give some background, because, you know, I was telling them, you and I've had some serious conversations about what really needed to happen. And
Okay, be glad.
From your last appearance on the show, which was only 3 or 4 weeks ago, and here we are back again, which lets people know we're serious. You know, we want to be able to keep the ball moving forward. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about your background and why we're here today and what we hope to accomplish. Okay, and if I might for 1 second, your other panel members, Sergeant Donnie Walters, Officer Sean James, and Officer Shanette Hall, please meet former retired Community Relations Officer Ronald Hampton.
Thank you very much. And good evening, brothers and sisters. How you all doing this evening? Let me take about 2 or 3 minutes just to mention myself and something about myself. I served in the Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington, D.C. for 24 years. And I have been retired probably longer than I served on the police department. And I also, from 1987 through 2010, I served as the executive director of the National Black Police Association. So I'm very familiar with the Ethical Society, people like Rodney Williams and some of the old folk. I know you all are much younger than them, but I know about the organization, and I also know the history of the National Black Police Association and the Ethical Society and the meetings and all of that. So I'm uniquely situated in terms of the historical perspective for all of this. And that's what has gotten me to the point of where I am now in relationship to all of the stuff that's going on. My past has enabled me to not only have certain experiences, but to also see certain things as related to this whole movement. This is a movement that has been around for a while. I could talk to you all about, which I know you all know, because you're there in St. Louis and part of the Ethical Society. So I know you're not just there because you think the Ethical Society need members, but you're there because there's situations and things that happen to Black police officers and Black communities that don't happen to white police officers and white communities. Let's be real. That's exactly what it is. And I have marveled at the past leadership of this organization. And I'm not talking about when I was around, I'm talking about past recent, as well as some of the things that the district attorney that you all have in that city now that's doing some of the things that need to be done as it relates to public safety and some of the other stuff that has happened, like, for example, the stuff regarding the police officers who wasn't credible. I would love to have had her in Washington, D.C. to move that, to make a move like that here in Washington, D.C., because there was a whole bunch of white police officers and some Black, to tell the truth, that wasn't credible, yet they were taking cases to court and lying and doing a whole bunch of other things. I just had to be real, because that's exactly what has happened, and I saw that then. So as we fast forward, the thing that Elaine and I got to talking about was I've also had the privilege to work on certain projects with some people over the years that have explored this idea of community control of the police. Now, the thing that should come to you is that, what does that mean? And I'm not talking about civilian complaint review. I'm not talking about, I forget what they call it in quality. No, it's not called quality control. It's called something else, where when I guess when bad police officers go bad, and I'm not talking about internal affairs. I thought I saw it in you all's organizational chart about the place where you would go to when a police officer that's complaining against police officers. I can't think of it, but it'll come to me. So when this whole notion of community control of the police is sort of explained by looking at how the police department is oversight on the police department. And I said it doesn't have nothing to do with civilian complaint review. It's actually looking at the police department and who's in control of the police department. Now, there's an example, and I'm use this word as an example. There's an example of what I'm talking about in Toronto, Canada. It's called the Toronto Police Services Board. It oversees the police department, and it's made up of civilians. They have a budget. They hire and fire the chief of police. They also involved in setting policies and practices for the police. They're even involved in discipline for the police department. And some of that stuff is on their website as it relates to what they do. So when I talk about community control of the police, I'm talking about it in that vein. I'm also talking about it in the vein that it happens in the UK, in the United Kingdom. I'm also talking about it in the vein that it happens in Australia and New Zealand. They also have what these boards that oversee the police department, and they do more than policy and practices. They do more than hire and fire the chief of police. They're actually involved in the operation of the police department, and from a civilian standpoint, and they have a budget to do so. So when I say I would like to see that in our community, I have worked with some organizations and individuals who see that in the context of community control of the police, that there's a body of people in our community, in our city, in the city of St. Louis, that would be, they could be appointed, they could be elected, and they would sit in this committee overseeing the police department. They would have something to do with policy. They would have something to do with hiring the chief of police or the commissioner, whatever you call them. They would also be involved in looking at discipline and other issues within the police service. But more importantly, from a community standpoint, it allows the community to be involved in setting policies and practices as it relates to public safety. As it relates to public safety, broader than police itself, but looking at public safety issues. And how would that be done? Let me give you an example how it would be done. In that process, there's something called reducing the footprint of the police. There's a lot of times when we call the police, and our community has a tendency to call the police a lot of times. And one of the reasons that we call the police as much as we do is because we don't always have control over the very issues that control our life. And we have been conditioned to believe that if we call the police, they're going to handle it. The fact of the matter is the police have nothing to do with housing. They can't get you a house. If you want a house, you need to go to the housing division or public housing, whatever they call it. If you need food, the police is not going to give you no food. You need to go to the Safeway or some place where you can get food. And there are plenty of places in our community where you can get that. If you need a job, the police can't get you a job. That is not something that they do. You have to go to the employment division to get a job. So these individuals that work in these organizations live in our community. And so how do we reduce the footprint of the police? Well, we had to do a couple of things. Number one, we need to do some analysis around why do we call the police? And then when I say we, I'm talking about our community. What do those calls look like? And you all work there in St. Louis. So if you work in day work, then you're probably responding to a variety of calls in that community for the police. But if you were to peel the, if you would go to the next page, those calls probably aren't and don't have anything to do with the police, and the police can't solve them. If they're not pure criminal incident kind of calls. So then if we look at that and say we look at the not at the number of calls, but the content of the calls, if they're being called for domestic violence. And every domestic violence call isn't a call where there's going to be violence. It can be a disagreement, and you all know that. I don't have to explain that to you. It can be about a disturbance in the community. It can be about youth. It can be about somebody in a vacant house. It can be a variety of those kind of things. So when you look at the call data, it's going to say what the call was for. It's not only going to document the call, it's going to say what the call was for and your response. And it should say whether or not what you did. What was the conclusion that you did while you was there? How long it took and all of that. So after we get that information, we look at it, analyze it, come to some agreement about what it says, what that information says. Then after we do that, now we got all the data about why you call, when you call, and all of that. The next thing we do is to conduct an assessment evaluation of the resources in our community.
So this is a good point. Bobby, can you put the slide up with the data so we can discuss that a little bit? And then Ron, you can move into the place of what we should be doing with this data and with this.
Okay. So.
Okay, can you all see the, can they see that? You all can't see it?
Mm-mm.
Okay, okay, let me tell you, in District 1, the audience can see the data.
Okay.
In District 1, and what we did was we have 2 data points. One for domestic, which encompasses those issues that are domestic violence related, maybe perhaps between marital situation or couples, etc.
Okay.
And
all right.
also, it could also include child abuse, anything related to children. And then the second data point that was captured is mental health.
Okay.
We thought that those were some of the 2 most important ones to look at. So,
right.
District 1 here in St. Louis, and this covers a period of January 1st, 2020 through November 12th, today, as of today. These are current numbers. District 1, for domestic calls that are being made by the public to the police, 3,386. For mental health in District 1, 539. In District 2, domestic, 1,578. Mental health, 382. District 3, 2,442. Mental health, 400. District 4, domestic, 2,221. Mental health, 647. District 5, domestic, 3,029. And mental health, 588. And the last, District 6, domestic, 3,239. Mental health, 389.
Okay.
And so when you look at this data, the top 2 districts that have numbers that are concerning would be District 4 for mental health is 647. District 5 for domestic at 3,029, as well as mental health in District 5 at 588. And then District 6 at 3,239 for domestic.
Okay.
Okay. Now, before you start, Ron, ESOP, can you all speak to these numbers in terms of give us maybe a visual about the districts, what's happening, what are some of the caveats to these numbers? Like I think one of these districts is a district that is heavily populated by the homeless? Maybe give some meaning to these numbers based on the districts.
Okay.
District 4, that's 647, and Elaine, you're absolutely correct. That's due to a large amount of our our unhoused population. A lot of our unhoused are in the areas of District 4. District 5, 588, there's some unhoused, but there's also some I guess you could say some of the rooming houses that we have in District 5 that house some of our individuals that have mental health type of symptoms. As far as our domestic numbers in that District 1, it's District 1 is a huge melting pot. It's a huge melting pot of different ethnicities in District 1. So we have not only our Black community, but there's our Bosnian, there is our Hispanic. So that too sometimes plays a factor into those numbers being what they are. And they are a lot of times, like you said, they're calls in which a lot of times on the domestic side, they want the boyfriend out. They want the father of their child out or the mother of their child. So a lot of times those calls are not physical situations, but more argumentative situations, I guess is the best term to use it. It's more argumentative, and it's more so, hey, I've been hanging out with my significant other all day and now I want them to leave. And now I'm gonna call the police. And usually some of those calls, they'll call the police as a threat to the person they want to leave.
Okay.
And then some people will honestly sit there until they see a police car come around the corner and then they'll leave.
Right.
Or, as soon as they pick up the phone and they hang up, a lot of times there's calls that officers get where they hear arguments in the background.
Yeah.
And, so a lot of those numbers on the domestic side, those were some of the calls that, are there. And on the mental health side, again, it's individuals that are in crisis, especially in District 4, with them being unhoused, no real addresses. So a lot of them require certain medications and they're self-medicating with either alcohol or street level pharmaceuticals. So that causes them to, have their episodes.
Right. Can I ask I have a couple of questions. Why do you use the term unhoused versus homeless?
You know what, that's a term that I have to give to Heather Taylor. She uses that. She used to use that term quite often, and I have found myself using it as well. I look at our unhoused as those that, it's just they homeless seems to put a certain stigmatism on
Right.
Unhoused, it gives them a certain level of dignity.
So as a matter of fact,
we don't know their situation.
Yeah,
Right.
but there are people who are unhoused who go to work every day.
This is very true.
Yeah, they go to work every single day, work aside. They just don't make enough to live in an apartment or a house. So
Right.
I think the term is appropriate, because you're right, for a couple of reasons, especially the stigma that goes along with that. The other thing that I would like to put down, I know you all are in possession of, that I would like to know is what kind of calls actually fall in that category? What kind of calls fall within the domestic category as well as the mental health category? Then the last question is, I thought I read somewhere where the mayor and the police commissioner in St. Louis was looking at to what extent they could divert funds from policing to say mental health professionals to be able to respond to calls for service and offload those calls from the police, but to mental health professionals and other people who work in the social service industry. Is that true?
As far as that, we've heard that idea. However, we haven't seen it in full effect. I know that for a fact, and again, you forgive me, but I will be, referring to Heather quite often, because that was one of the things that she was really fighting for, because some of these calls, like you just said, some of these calls, it's calls that we need more of a social worker to go out and assist on than the actual police department. So as far as funds for that, it has been, I've heard rumors about it, but I can't, confirm.
But we do, excuse me, we do have a training called Crisis Intervention Team. It's a CIT. So we are trained. It's a weekly course where they train us officers to know how to handle mental illness citizens.
Okay.
And I want to add on to the downtown. Another reason why it's so high. We have Greyhound and Amtrak down there. So a lot of times these people, they leave Chicago and come to St. Louis.
It's transit.
Right. And we have a lot of that.
Yeah.
Well, let me add in a little bit, sir, if you don't mind, Mr. Hampton. I'm sorry.
Please.
Slightly shift this a little bit. So, we all come from, or the majority of us come from law enforcement, right? We understand how this goes, and we understand what we have been expected to do for a very long time. However, as you, ma'am, stated in the numbers that you got, we focus on domestic violence, and we focus on calls that things of that nature. When we look at all of these different societal issues that exist, and we must understand how they have a strong correlation to crime, right? So we're never truly going to be able to separate societal issues from crime. You're never going to be able to do it, okay? So if we're talking about the unhoused, if we are talking about people who are dealing with mental illnesses, if we are talking about people who are dealing with drugs, drug addiction, or anything like that, we're never going to be able to separate that from crime. Because of that reason, officers need to make sure that they are trained to the best of their ability to be able to respond to these people once they come to these calls. America has taught us, or the world has taught us, when you are in need, you call 911.
Right.
We can't take it out of people's heads. It's going to be too hard. So it's easier to make sure that officers are trained basic stuff, having decent communication when they're talking to people, right? Now, when we begin to talk about people who need actual and more in-depth help when it comes to being in transition from housing, when it comes to dealing with their mental illness, when it comes to dealing with drug addiction, if we have people who are calling 911 more so than they are calling other entities for this, that is a miscommunication and a breakdown from government. That's not a miscommunication and a breakdown from police departments. Governments are failing. The city of St. Louis is failing if they are not able to adequately communicate to the people who are in need the social services that exist out there. That's a breakdown in government, because they're supposed to be here to serve people and to help people. So it's multifaceted. It can't all just be put on police. It can't all be, there's a number of different things that are here.
Oh no, I agree with you, but I just want you to take a leap of faith. And sometimes faith is defined as something that you can't feel and see, but you know that it's there. And this is something, this what I'm talking about isn't new. And you're absolutely right. Government in a sort of a sense has failed. And who has stepped up, and if you recall, I used the word condition, that we've been conditioned to believe that the police has the solution to the problem, and they don't. And they have acknowledged, the law enforcement community, chiefs of police have acknowledged that they will say things like, and I know you all have heard this before, we can't arrest our way out of this problem. They're absolutely right. But that's saying it is different than their behavior, because they behave in a way that they act like that they can arrest their way out of it, but they can't. And so nothing gets solved. But what I'm suggesting is, and what I've worked on, and I know it's true, that we can relieve them of it and then call on government to do its job. Now, let me digress for 1 minute. When I was in college, my social scientists and those subjects that were related to social work, the instructor used to say that the criminal justice system was labeled the institution of last resort. And why was that the case? Because the way we went about solving and working in our communities and with our residents is that we would apply everything and try to use it before we would resort to the criminal justice system. And the proof of that is that the role, that used to be role of the church in our community, that has shrunk. The role of schools and education in our community, that has shrunk. And what we do now is that we utilize the criminal justice system as a not as the last resort, but that's the first thing we go to. There are actually programs in my city, I live in Washington, DC, that if a young person, man or woman, I mean, male or female, wanted to get some assistance and help, they couldn't get it. But at the minute they get arrested, they can get all the help in the world. But I want to suggest to you all that if they get it after they get arrested, it's too late. Because an arrest record on a juvenile will ruin his or her life. So the thing that I'm talking about is not taking nothing away from the police, but initiating the citizen role in public safety. You know, you all are young and old enough, and also young enough to been around doing the community policing thing. And if you read about community policing and been involved in the education and training of it, it talks about a partnership between the police and the community. And in my mind, a partnership can be a 50-50, but most of the time it's a 70-30, maybe even a 60-40. But what happens is that the role that the public has played is that you call the police, not that you do nothing about it. And what I want to suggest to you is that we can do something about it. While we're doing something about it, that initiates our role, but it also reduces the role or the visible role of policing in our community, so then they can concentrate and focus on the things that they really need to be doing around the issues of public safety that have to do with danger. And the way we do that is, like I said, looking at the data, analyzing the data, understanding what we would need to understand what's in that category of domestic violence. And I'm going to tell you why. What's in that category of mental health? For the simple reason is that we have worked in projects, and there's one here in the city and down in North Carolina, where when there was a call for someone who's having a mental health episode, it got sent directly to the Department of Behavioral Health. And there was no need for the police to come. But in order to know that, we need to know who works and lives in our community and what services are available, because there's some government services that decentralize to communities where they need to be doing this. And of course, some of this involves getting memorandums of understandings and agreements from people and community folk. Domestic violence. Sometimes, do you know that when there are domestic violence, and I'm not talking about the shooting part, I'm talking about the argument part, like the brother was just talking about. That's a matter of having somebody come there that has some experience with dealing with that, like a counselor. There's organizations like the National Association of Black Social Workers, the National Organization of Black Psychologists, the National Organization of Black Psychiatrists, a whole host of organizations that I've worked with obtain memorandums of agreement and understanding that they respond to those kind of calls in the community in which they live, so that we don't have to call the police. Because we know when we call the police, that escalates the possibility of certain things happening that may end up in that individual losing their life when that wasn't the case in the beginning. And that's what we can do. So all it just takes is those two things: finding out what this is and know what's included in those categories, and then identifying what resources we have in our community, what resources are available in our community. So look, if the mayor and the police superintendent are talking about those kind of things, why is it that we haven't seen the evidence of those things? And see, sometimes when that kind of happens, then we need to say to government that if you say you're going to do this, you have created an expectation and we want you to do it. We want to see those services. And not only do we want to see them, but they had to be decentralized in the kind of way that the residents are actually going to benefit from those services when they see them. And that's going to take work. And it's also going to take some convincing, and it's also going to take some deconditioning of the citizens. Because see, the citizens have been conditioned, like I said, that when something happens like that, they pick up the phone to call 911. And even in cities like mine, where we now had 311, we still get a lot of calls that the police don't really have to deal with, and they go off on 311. Well, what we want to do is we want to not only be able to say that we want to be able to say that to reduce their footprint, we want to be able to actually beef up the services that those individuals in that community, in that neighborhood, need to be on the receiving end of, because that's the way it should be working. And that way, the police don't have to respond to it. Now, when I was a police, I was on the police department when the Supreme Court case that changed domestic violence to what we know it is right now. Because once upon a time, police officers didn't get involved in that kind of stuff. But then because of the history of this particular case and the calling of the police, that's why we now have mandatory arrests when we talk about domestic violence. But I'm telling you, if you talk to most police officers, and you all the police officers, they don't necessarily like to respond to domestic violence cases. They can be kind of dangerous, but they don't like to do it because they don't, because of the personal nature of it. Well, I agree with that. I don't think I don't think they ought to be responding. I just don't think they ought to even get them called. But somebody has to be able to be available to respond to that person's house, to separate them, and then talk to them about what it is that they need to do, and then follow that process so that they can get something done past that initial call. Because if you don't handle it, and I'm gonna ask you all this, if you don't handle it that day, there's a high percentage that you're gonna be back the next day. And then if you don't handle it that day, then there's a high percentage that it's gonna end up in somebody getting injured or hurt or die as a result of it. What we wanna do is prevent that from the very beginning. And the way you prevent it is to actually provide services to people when they're asking. Every time somebody calls the police, usually it's about somebody reaching out to get their hands on some resources that does something about the situation that they find themselves in that is sort of out of control or that they can't control. And police officers can't do that. Police officers cannot, police officers wasn't trained to do that. And even with the extra education, they're still not trained to do that. So what we would like for them to do is, and we're not against them seeking additional training because it makes sense for them to have it. It may even make sense for police departments to have these specialized units where that they provide these kind of services because officers have been extra trained and educated to be able to do it. But you all know police officers, you have to know. I know police officers, and I'm gonna be real straightforward. I know police officers that wasn't shit. I wouldn't let them pick up trash from my house. But they thought they were police officers. But let's be real, that everybody who wears wears a uniform, carries a gun, and wears a badge ain't worthy of being a police officer. But they don't think that. So all I'm just saying is that we can help ourselves in the communities that we live in. We can do it, but there's some work involved in it, because nothing that is successful is not without work.
Right. And Ron, I want to have them respond to your points, because one thing I want to know is, are you guys aware of whether or not there's been any kind of community assessments done around what resources are in the community? And if so, how long has it been? Are we overdue for a new one, a new assessment? Because one of the goals when we start talking about these shiftings, I keep thinking about the rhetoric and the commotion that was centered around defund the police, and how they did not properly define or give a working definition of what that would look like. So you had a lot of folks up in arms about thinking the police departments were going to be completely dismantled. Now, I knew that you cannot possibly be talking about dismantling police departments.
No, you can't.
But what that said to me was that what you're looking at is the reallocation of resources in a more balanced, distributive way, where you can create community-based resources to offset some of that unnecessary interaction with the police that really requires other types of responses.
Right.
So assessments, do we have assessments that are going on by the police department, or have there been collaborative efforts between what community resources do exist and the police to kind of figure out what we have, what we don't have, and what is needed?
As far, go ahead, Shanette.
Go ahead, Donnie.
As far as in the city, any assessments that have been done, I'm not aware of that as of right now. I know we do have community-based organizations such as the Urban League. And I know from teaching classes at the Urban League that a lot of times our communities, or I should say, I don't think they're utilized as much as they should be. The Urban League has been in St. Louis, and it has a great chapter in St. Louis City and County, and they welcome the individuals to come and utilize their services on a daily basis. They have all kind of, programs that's there for them. And has an assessment done? Again, I'm not 100% sure about any assessments being done in the city as of lately.
Okay. What about in the county?
And so just to even add on that, the mere fact, and not going against what it is that you're all saying or trying to say is bad, but the mere fact that we got to separate it and say, hey, well, was there one done in the city or was there one done in the county? That shows our separation right here. We're not even on the same page. It's what that divides us. So that almost even gives you your answer right there. If we got to hope and pride and look and see, well, I think there was one, well, maybe there was one in Pine Lawn, or maybe in Wellston, or maybe in Greenwood Village. That means,
well, it's let me say this. It's government has a tendency, well, not a tendency, government has used resource assessments before, but they use them in a very pointed sense in terms of what it is that they're looking for. If we use that, which this calls for us to use an assessment tool, then we're going to be looking for some specific things ourselves. What are the skills that exist in our community? And you all have to know that when you're talking about a project like this, you're also talking about a pilot project and using a reasonable size area of a community so that you can have something to evaluate it against, and there would be for. So usually organizations like the Urban League and other community-based organizations, I mean, since I've been retired, I've done a variety of things. I've taught in college, and now I'm working at a nonprofit. So some of the things that we do at a nonprofit would be to lend itself to evaluate and identifying the resources in the community. So then those resources could be distributed throughout the community to help people do what it is that they need to do. So we have to do that.
Yeah, and by no means does this mean that like we don't have any resources in St. Louis.
Oh no, y'all have resources now.
So we have some, and the Urban League will do some good things, and there's a couple places out there that will do some good things. There's a lot of other smaller nonprofits that do some amazing, excellent work. The thing with St. Louis is that we're so fragmented that there should not necessarily be a reason as to why the right hand doesn't necessarily know what the left hand is doing or is not doing, I'm sorry. So if it's all meant to be for the people, like we just got done, Officer or Sean was just talking about how you have people who are coming in and out from other cities. Just imagine how much people are going in and out from St. Louis County. I mean, I live on the verge of St. Louis City and St. Louis County. So if we don't know, if we have not had any type of comprehensive assessment done for the area or for the region, if you will, then once again, we're kind of failing. But yeah, I mean, there's a number of different amazing resources out there, a number of different ones. And then a lot of our smaller localities, whether it be Ferguson, there's a lot of great things out there. But
I shared with Elaine that if St. Louis would allow us to do a pilot project, it would be St. Louis, somewhere in the city of St. Louis. And it would probably just be maybe 10, 12 block radius, because you can't take on a large kind of area and then also hoping to be successful in terms of what it is you want to do. You want to have a pilot project area, and then one that is reasonable enough where you can do the kind of things that this calls for you to do, and then also be able to produce and document the results that you want to do. And then you can talk about enlarging it or spreading it at a later time. But you don't want to start off real big or anything like that. But you also want it to be, you also want the area to be comprehensive enough that, and that's why the reason to do the evaluation or the assessment in terms of what the resources are. But you would also, in the assessment, you also need to know organizations like the Urban League, like the other community-based organizations, as well as what they're doing and their connection with government, and to what extent is government decentralized to look at those kind of issues. I mean, in my city, the Department of Behavioral Health, you don't have to go downtown to go to DBH. They have offices in the community, and that's what we want to know. And then we want to know how long, what are their hours? Because if they work in 9 to 5 and that community have mental health issues, then they're out of touch with what's going on in that community. And so there's going to be some expectations set in that process, but you can't expect something from somebody when you haven't let them know that you're going to be expecting it from them. Because if they work in 9 to 5, they're going to keep on working 9 to 5. But if you say to them, there's an expectation in this community that your services are needed till 12 o'clock at night, then the right thing for them to do is to work out a shift where they got people in that building till 12 o'clock at night, because the services, the demands dictate that the services be available. But you have to talk to people and gain some cooperation from them in order to get those kind of things done. And I just believe once you make people aware of those kind of things, it has been in other cases, in other places, that we've been able to do those kind of things.
So what is, Shanette, do you know or believe, what do you know about people actually knowing how to access those resources that you're mentioning? Do you have a sense of whether or not the community really knows who to call for resources other than calling the police?
I think that we have our mainstream ones, or you have your main ones, like that was already mentioned, like the Urban League. That's easy. Just quite naturally, that's ingrained in Black folks. We think we can call the NAACP for help, or stuff like that. I'm not really sure when the last time the NAACP has helped that much, where to where you can call them. But we kind of just know these things, but there's a number of different other resources out there that exist that people don't necessarily know about. And then there's a lot of other resources are out there that exist that they themselves are not even receiving funding. If we look at where our large are going to, if our large donations are coming in from private entities, from a lot of the corporations that feel bad for, you know, minorities and poor and Black folk, that they want to come up and give some money, they give them to the places that they feel most comfortable with. So while the Urban League does a lot of great things, the Urban League receives a lot of the donations, and the other places that, when you're talking about doula centers, they have one in Ferguson. How many donations are they receiving? And they're helping Black mothers deliver babies safely. You know what I'm saying? And they're going to these larger organizations. And while those places are doing good, we have some of these grassroots or nonprofits as well that's doing great work. And they're more ingrained into the community, into those smaller pockets of neighborhoods. Yeah, that's right. They're not receiving funding because people feel comfortable giving it to the larger, more mainstream places that we keep on mentioning here. And that's where we begin to see some of our discrepancies.
Yeah.
And with I've dealt with, in certain areas that I work in part-time, we have an area here in St. Louis, the Central West End, and it's a popular entertainment type of area. And a lot of times there is a lot of individuals who have mental health symptoms. And I can speak of one individual who I've dealt with now over the past 3 years. He honestly, truly needs to be in a hospital. No ifs, ands, buts about it. The neighborhood has gotten a neighborhood order of protection against him. He's been arrested numerous times. At one point, he had over 15 bench warrants, and he's violated this neighborhood order of protection repeatedly. We actually contacted the courts. The court said, okay, we're going to do a 96-hour hold on him. The hospital had him, and the hospital said, oh, he's not a danger to himself nor anyone in the community, so we're going to release him. And as soon as he gets out, he's good for about 24 hours, and then he begins to, I guess, self-medicate again, and now he goes through another mental crisis. Right. And I have spoken with our, as Mr. Hampton was talking about, our behavioral health system, and yet they've done nothing to really give this individual the services that he truly requires. Right. And that's on that note. And you were talking about defunding the police. And again, to me, that is a term that the government has thrown out there, because when citizens say defund the police, it's like, where did that come from? You know, and I can feel, and Sean can attest to this as well. The city, since we went under city control, and that's what we're under now, we were under state control. And as Mr. Hampton was talking about, we did have an appointed board of commissioners, and that appointed board of commissioners kind of regulated things. Now we're under city control, and the funds that honestly, truly needs to go, they've been reallocated since we've been under city control. So defunding the police, they're looking at cities such as LAPD. LAPD has almost $1 million, six-figure $1 million budget. NYPD, they have a almost six-figure, budget, and they're talking about defunding those larger departments. City of St. Louis, I think our budget when we were under state control was like $8 million that was supposed to go to us, which was for vehicles and, our trainings and different things like that. Already that's been reallocated since 2014.
No, but let me ask you a question. So do you said 8 million? That do you know what the size of St. Louis is city? Do you know the size of the city? How many people?
We're roughly 66 square miles. We got roughly 300 and little bit over 300,000 in our population.
Residents, okay. All right. So.
But that $8 million, let me say this, that $8 million is a guesstimated amount. I heard that in a conversation
Okay.
a while ago. So it's not a definite number.
Yeah.
And again, that was when we were under the state.
In the state.
And the state ensured that the city paid that amount in order for the department to run effectively.
Yeah.
So again, it's not a, don't quote me on the exact price.
Yeah.
Sean, did you hear anything in that ballpark?
About the budget? No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So it's again, it's you know, just again, me hearing it in conversation.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, that's quite interesting.
No, it just sounds like, because I know, for example, that like you mentioned LAPD, in New York City, you could take $1 billion. You could take $1 billion out of the budget of each one of those police departments, and it wouldn't even affect any part of the police department, because their budgets are into the triple figures in billions. New York Police Department, the New York City Police Department has probably somewhere around 160, 180 billion dollar budget, and they were talking about taking $120 million out of their budget and redirecting it to social services organizations. That was in the New York budget. Well, 120 million to 180 billion is like $1,000. You ain't gonna make it really more than that. You're not. So, my point is that it's all relative, and that's why it really goes deeper than just talking about it. Like Elaine said, it's really about doing some analysis around not only how much money they get, but what do they do with that money, and then measuring the success of it. Because each and every one of you all, there's 3 of you all on this call, how many times would you call a plumber to your house and pay him $300 and he don't do anything?
Never.
Once, but you would never do it twice.
Yeah.
You never would. And if we're honest, there are things, if we're honest, because we can lie to other people, we can't lie to ourselves. There are things I know, and I'm gonna take it on myself. There are things that when I was a police officer, my police department was doing, that they should have had somebody else doing it, because they wasn't doing it. They were bullshitting people. They were not doing it, and it wasn't getting done. But yet they was taking all of the glamour and whatnot that was associated with it. So what they're talking about now is that why not take it and give it to someone? Let me give you, I'm gonna shut up after this, but let me give you a perfect example. In my city, there's some organizations, and I know you all have heard of them. Violence interrupters. Those people, a lot of them are formerly incarcerated people. They work in communities. They're called credible messengers and all those kind of things. They work in communities and they work with kids. In my community, they've been very successful over 20 years. And I know some of them. I grew up in the community working with a lot of these guys. Just so happened, I went one way, they went the other way. But when they got out of incarceration, they began to do the kind of productive things that really led to having a better community. And I've worked with some of these guys, and I'm telling you that they have, when you talk about, they have proven their effectiveness and their efficiency at doing the work that they do. But when we talk about government and law enforcement recognizing the value of the work that they do, they don't want to recognize it, because they have been they're conditioned to believe that if you make an arrest, then somehow or another that's a solution to the problem. And what the credible messengers do, and those organizations that have individuals that work in our community, they are really preventing situations. They're intervening in situations and prevention and intervention in situations that have far more value to public safety in our community than what the police does. And I'm not just saying that because I witnessed it, yeah, I did, but also the research around these issues, the research would also address some of that too. So I think the movement now is to just look at those kind of issues to the extent that we can use them and that they're going to be proficient and effective in our community. And we have to have some faith. Like I was saying to the sister, sometimes you can't see it. You just have to believe that, having faith that it's going to work. And then you try it. And I'm willing to try it. Now I told Elaine, and I'm telling you all this. Some of this would require me to come into St. Louis. I don't want no money. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but if you're going to do it, if that's something that you would consider to do it, then some of that means that I had to come to St. Louis to do it, because you had to talk to people about it. You had to explain to them about it. You had to talk to them about their role. They had to believe that they had to be, I know this isn't correct English, but they had to be unconditioned. Because see, they've been conditioned to believe certain things. So then you had to spend time with them and work with them around having a new mindset, having a new belief system that they can get this done and that they can do it themselves. And so that means spending some time there talking to people, also doing, getting someone to do the resource assessment, looking closer than we have in terms of the categories and what's in those categories. Because I know I can go to the Unified Communication Division here in Washington, DC and get a printout of all the runs that happened that day. And it will tell me the runs. It will also say how much time was spent, because you check in, you check out. I'm talking about on the run. And then you also had to talk about the disposition. Well, we need to have that information, because if we're going to be talking about alternatively handling those situations, we need to know what those situations are. And then we need to be honest. See, I believe in being honest with folks. I don't want to sell people no bullshit. I tell them what it is that they need to do. And you need to get some guarantee from people that they're going to participate in the process.
That was going to be my next point, Ron.
Yeah.
Because this, they can only do so much, ESOP.
Right.
Not just for them. It's not just for my platform or just for you. In order for this to work, we got to have the buy-in and participation of folks in the community.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I'm going to make a point. So, typically, what I've witnessed, without calling anybody out, a lot of times when things air on certain platforms, if it's someone being shot, killed, a car accident, a drug bust, the numbers are like astronomical in viewership. And what I'm saying is that we've got to figure out, like you said, a way to move our people away from just being interested in the gore and the loss of life, and sitting back watching that, and become real participants. And I believe that is going to be a significant role, where we're going to have to figure out strategically how to engage St. Louis, how to engage, not that all of them are not engaged. So please don't walk away thinking I'm saying nobody's engaged, but I've been here long enough to watch and observe and look, and I'm sensing there's a certain level of engagement that is wanted, but then there is this often sitting back, critiquing, complaining, less engagement. And I want to be optimistic about what we can do to get folks involved, to start thinking that I can change stuff. I can make an impact in this community. There's a lot of complacency, and that has to be addressed.
Right. Well, you're absolutely right. And it's not without some conditioning again. People are in those places, they settled into them because government, of which policing is a part of, have told people what it is that their role is, and then let them go do their job, you know. But
yeah, I made that comment because you guys are here on the ground, you touching and feeling the people and interacting. What are your observations about what it would take to strategically implement a pilot project here and getting people engaged and keeping them engaged for the long haul?
right.
My viewpoint is that, you know, we do have um, elected officials by our communities, our alder people, and it's 28 alder people, and it's unfortunate that some communities pressure their alder people while other communities say nothing to their alder people. You know, I received a phone call from a relative of mine who was having issues in his neighborhood, and the issues he was having, he said he reached out to his alder person, and his alder person wouldn't call him back.
Yeah.
You know, he was saying, hey, you know, he admitted to me, he says, hey, I understand that the police department is short manpower, but we feel as though our alder person, you know, could help us as well. And he was highly upset that his alder person would not reach out to him. And I feel that that's a situation that's happening in a lot of our communities. You know, we have some alder people that are intact and in tuned, and we got other ones that are disconnected. And you know, sometimes they will go against us as far as the police department and our chief of police and speak out against him when, you know, he's doing as much as he can with what he got. You know, and learning from Heather, we will call our chief out when he's wrong. But in certain instances that, hey, it's some things we cannot do. In some of these calls, we can't undo in 10 to 15 minutes that's been embedded the past 10 to 15 years.
That's right.
So I think when Mr. Hampton was speaking about government, we have to understand that we do have a level of city government that is being paid by taxpayers, and a lot of them, you know, we don't really see them working for our communities. They may put a dumpster in the alley, a street light here, or something like that, but they're not making a demand for behavioral health specialists to come into their neighborhood. They're not making, you know, real demands, in my opinion, of let's work with our unhoused. You know, it's like you said, it's, as Shanette was saying, it's like everybody's in tune
Right.
or trained to call 911, which is understandable, and that's what we're here for. But sometimes, you know, the government has to step up and do something. And piggyback off Shanette, she said it is a shame that, I have to say, city, county.
Right.
We've been doing this. I've been on for 18, Sean been on for 20, Shanette's been on for a while. And that's it's kind of like a inside city joke. You know, what side of skinker is it on? You know, it's that type of deal to say, hey, is it a county issue? Is it a city issue? But what I think the Ethics Society Police and, you know, working with Shanette these past few years is we're trying to tear down, you know, we're trying to fill in that river. I don't want to say build a bridge. We're trying to fill it in so we can walk comfortably between city and county. You know, it's a goal to understand what's the issues that the county has and what are they doing? Can we implement it here in the city and vice versa?
Right.
Okay. I want to go back to one point that was made about the population size of, you gave an estimate about 300,000 people in St. Louis. Of the
Yes.
of the 6 precincts, can you give us a breakdown of population size of those precincts? District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Woo, off the top of my head,
Okay.
I can't break it down, but the 6th district is one of our largest
Largest.
districts, and it goes pretty much almost to the it goes to the Chain of Rocks Bridge. So
Okay.
you're thinking from St. Louis Avenue all the way to the Chain of Rocks Bridge.
Okay.
And the redistricting that was done by our former chief,
Mhm.
he was misinformed when he said that redistricting the city would reduce the amount of calls. And that's not true, because he made some districts larger,
Larger than
which
others.
increased their calls. Because if there's an accident, let's say at Riverview and Hall Street, let's just take that for instance, and there's a accident at Goodfellow and Natural Bridge, that's two, you got 4 cars out. So for that entire area, it may only be 6 cars in service. So now you already took out 2 cars. God forbid we get a shooting, that's 2 more cars. Then if you get that domestic call, that's another car. Guess what? The 6th district is now out of cars. And now they're going to have to depend on another district. So if the 5th district has a lot going on, they're out of cars. So the next district may be the 4th district. But if it's a Friday or Saturday night and we're dealing with cruisers, they're out of cars. And in the summertime, you'll get a car from the 2nd district. When I was a sergeant in the 2nd district, I had to send cars from, you're looking at from Hampton, roughly from Hampton and 40 to Walnut Park. That's almost a 20 or 30-minute drive.
Yeah.
And, depending on traffic, and if it's not a priority 1 call, it's a domestic. So by the time they get from one side of the city to the other, that person is gone.
So how many police officers do you all have?
The city, we're roughly at about 1,100. And myself and Shanette both work in in recruiting. We're both in recruiting, and we laugh and we joke all the time because our tables are always right next to each other, but it's a friendly deal. And we're fishing in the same pond, sometimes with the same fishing pole, depending, we're in the same pond, and it's we joke about it and we both laugh because we'll be right next to each other. Hey, come over here. I got more trinkets. No, I got more trinkets. But all in all, we do work with each other because we both know the common goal is to increase the police department with positive minorities. Like I said, myself, I grew up in the city. I grew up on Cook and Whittier. So I watched my neighborhood transform. Becoming a police officer, and I have no problem telling my story, was never like this ultimate dream. Never wanted to be the police officer. Never wanted to be a police officer. I needed a job. I got hired. I started off liking this job. 18 years later, I love this job. I've been offered jobs in different departments, making more money. No, I like working for my city. Like 2014, creating a de-escalation program after Mike Brown, and it's de-escalation through communication. As Mr. Hampton was referring, sometimes on some of these calls, when we have people in crisis, it's trying to talk them down. I'm a crisis negotiator. So a lot of times I know what it is to be on scene and on the phone. When Officer Bohannon was killed, I was on the phone for hours with the individual that pretty much ultimately took his life. And Sean was there afterwards, and he saw how much of a toll it took on me mentally, because guess what? I still had to talk to this person with a level of respect and with a level of compassion to try to get this individual out of a house safely after he did what he did to a police officer.
Right.
So sometimes we go into these situations and we have to put our issues that we have at home. We have to put them on the back burner when we're dealing with crisis. You know, sometimes we got to understand that when we're in our police cars, we may have an argument with our significant other. And now I'm going into a domestic. Whose side am I going to be on if I just had an argument with my significant other?
Yeah.
You know, so sometimes we have to, as law enforcement, we have to learn to put those in our back pocket. And quite often, we do that a lot to where our pots get overwhelmed.
Yeah,
It
that's
gets
right.
it overflows. Some of us in law enforcement need some sort of mental help.
Oh,
You know,
no.
we got a lot of officers out here throughout the country. Let me say, it's officers throughout the country that's dealing with some sort of mental illness, and they are afraid to say something in regards because they may lose their livelihood.
That's
They're
right.
afraid to speak up.
And some of those same ones are being sent on calls to intervene involving somebody with a mental health issue.
Exactly.
You know, some of this don't make sense to me. I just can't make it make sense. And the other piece would be, you're mentioning officers who may be struggling with mental health issues, and or they have that situation that you said about maybe having had a disagreement with your spouse. How do we know how this officer has left home that morning?
You don't. You honestly don't.
That's right.
You know, and sometimes as a sergeant and a supervisor, it's up to us as sergeants to get to know our officers. When I had a squad, every day before they hit the streets, I would say, hey, I appreciate you being here. There's a lot of places you can be, but you're here today. Thank you. Sometimes that makes a difference. Seeing my officers, you know, they come in on a regular basis, you know, jovial and happy, and then one day they just got this solemn look. Hey, let me pump their brakes. Let me see what's going on. This may be a day, hey, I need you to do some admin things for me. You know, we have to, as supervisors, we have to recognize that, because I'm in control of sending out this officer. If this officer does something, guess who's got to come and supervise that scene? I do. And I want to know that, hey, I got to know the personalities of my officers. That means I got to talk to them. You know, as supervisors, that's something that we have to do. De-escalation through communication means communicating with each other. You know, sometimes we have this, and Mr. Hampton would know because he was there, you know, back in the day when they had a wheel gun and they shared it. Just know when they shared it, that it's a mentality that police officers never show weakness.
Yeah.
Police officers never show weakness. And I commend our female officers, because guess what? Our female officers give us a certain balance that we
That's right.
sometimes as male officers forget.
That's
Female
right.
officers come in and will show an emotion, and we're like, I couldn't get that done. And I've been told by some female officers, hey, sometimes you just got to be this way. So I have learned through my years from female partners and just female officers that I respect, how to be compassionate, how to be understanding, how not to always be so, oh, you should do this, but okay, let's talk about it. Sometimes listening to people makes them feel better.
Right.
No,
Don,
I appreciate all that. And that's why, let me say this, that's why I think anything that we can do to get citizens, residents of our neighborhoods and communities to contribute their half, their percentage, also helps us in terms of what it is that we expect from our police officers. Because police officers are human. They are. And there's an expectation. I know my expectation was to go there every day and retire and leave. And that's exactly what I did. But in that process of doing that, you got to care for other people. So I not only cared for my residents, I cared for the guys that I worked with, those who would allow me to care for them. Because some of them didn't, but most of them did. But that's why it's important that we really work together collectively to get some of these things done that plague our community, and as police officers, we don't be walking around with our backpack so heavy that we can't carry it. So we need to just distribute that weight sometime to some of the other components in our community and let them carry some of that stuff too. So it just makes sense. I really do. I appreciate that.
Okay. I wanted to ask John one question before we move into identifying any questions we may have. You mentioned about crisis, or did you refer to it as crisis training or mental health training? With
Crisis intervention team. That's the name of it. But we
Team.
have, it's called crisis intervention training. The training we have.
About how many? I'm interested in knowing about how many people do you have trained in that capacity?
All the officers are trained.
All of them are?
Right. They started a couple of years ago. It didn't start this year. It started a few years ago.
Okay. Okay. All right. Do you all ever work with compatibly with social workers when you go on?
Yes. I'm sorry. When
with social workers when you go on scene?
No. On scene, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I asked that question because, and perhaps maybe you could describe the CIT program. I'm just thinking that social workers or clinical social workers would be skilled and trained in a way to really be best able and equipped to de-escalate situations involving people with mental illness. What type of training do officers receive in the CIT program that makes them equivalent to a social worker, a licensed social worker?
We're actually trained by social workers, or However, I agree 100%. I believe that they should be out there on those calls. I don't see why an officer would disagree with that. I mean, it makes our job much easier. And the people who need their help will get their help. Because if you think about it, we respond to the same calls almost every day. Same thing. So it'll be a big help. I don't see what's the big fight about it.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know there was a fight, but I know that I never hear them mentioned in these situations as a resource.
Well, it's been coming up. I've been hearing about this for a while now. I don't know why it's not implemented.
Okay.
our the CIT program is a 40-hour training that's put on by our behavioral health services. It's a combination of different entities when it comes to mental health and the different issues that evolves around mental health. But again, it's only a 40-hour block.
Okay.
And once you complete the 40-hour block, then they're considered you to be a CIT trained officer. I'm a CIT trained officer. And again, it's here, I can put it to you like this. If I wasn't on the crisis negotiation team, and with me working in community engagement and recruiting, I may not interact with a person going through crisis for 2 years. So I never get the opportunity to utilize that service. So even though I'm CIT trained, if I'm not on the street, I may not deal with them. We got CIT trained officers that work in narcotics. So they may not go back, they may not interact with anyone that's going through a crisis for who knows how long.
Okay.
All of our recruits to graduate the academy are required they receive training while in the academy as well once they graduate. So the training is pretty much an ongoing thing when it comes to the crisis intervention training.
And I really think that us as officers are trained. We know what to do. It's about that officer taking the time to use the training he or she received. So that's the problem, I think. I don't think we're using the training as we're taught. We're just trying to hurry up and get finished with this call and move on.
Right.
Do you think, okay, even though they're trained in CIT techniques, do you think their primary role tends to really be their first line of thinking when they go out on calls like that? Because I've seen too many instances where it seems to me they were trigger happy and it could have been resolved at a lower level.
Coming from a defensive tactics and firearms standpoint, we talk about the situation in Philadelphia. Okay.
Right.
And that's the most recent.
Yes.
And the subject was going through a crisis. His family said he was going through a crisis.
Right.
The officers responded. However, their skill level of dealing with an armed assailant is in question to me. Was everything there for, under the deadly force policy, everything was there for them in that justifiable shoot? Because everything was there. In other words, he had a weapon. He was proceeding towards them. Now, proceeding towards them. But I'll go back even further to where there was a situation, I can't think what city it was. It was a female officer who was white, and an assailant was white, had a weapon, and he chased her around the car 3 times before she took 1 shot.
Exactly.
3 times. So when we have that comparison, I can see where the community is saying, why did it happen over here this way and then happen over here this way? And I will be the first one to say it. I've said it to the chief, and I'll say it here. Chief, you got folks on your department that can't fight. Let's just be perfectly honest. Their first line of defense, they may not know how to disarm a person. I used to be on the SWAT team. We have things called less than lethal shotguns. And what it does is it's orange colored and it shoots out a beanbag round. Is it PC? It may not be, but guess what? I'd rather you go to the hospital with a few bruises from a beanbag round and get the help you need than your family arranging funeral, arrangements. And so maybe putting that in perspective of saying, okay, here we get a call of a subject with a gun, a subject with a knife going through a mental crisis, and hey, let me hit him with 2 or 3 of these beanbag rounds. He dropped to the ground. We do the dog pile, we handcuff him, and we get him into an ambulance and get him to the hospital.
That's
Same
right.
situation.
In that instance, he had a butter knife. And it was a butter knife. And you have 2 officers who act like they was more scared of him than them being able to come together and maintain that situation in a way that he still had his life.
Right. And I mean, it happened in Texas.
Yeah.
Same situation. Mother calls about her son having, he in the house. Police show up. He in the house having his issue.
Right.
Police show up and he comes out the front door, startles them, and, they're shouting the verbal commands. And then it's like, okay, as you're backing up, again, it's we in law enforcement quite often Monday morning quarterback. I look at things from a training standpoint always. And I see where the community is upset, because when you have a white officer being chased around the car 3 or 4 times before she takes a shot, and then we get 2 males against another male and they pull the trigger right away, I can see the anger.
Yeah.
I can see how it's upset, but we have to think of ways other than, that deadly force.
That's exactly right.
Right out the pocket. If I know going into a call that this person is going through some sort of mental crisis, I'm going to add, it's certain things. Hey, all of us been to, Black churches. When a person catch the Holy Ghost, we put that circle around them. That's what we may have to do. Yeah. We may have to contain a person to where they're not a harm to anyone.
Yeah. Can I share this with you all?
Yeah, and we gotta move. Let me do this first. Melissa.
Okay. Oh no, what I was gonna say was I had to do a television interview about that incident because the people wanted to ask me, was that necessary? Right before I went on the television to do the interview, a colleague of mine in the UK and also one here in this country sent me a copy of a video. And the video was about this happened in London, England. Police officers don't have guns. This happened in London, England. The Met in London. Man had a machete, not a butter knife, a machete. And the officers were staying out of his way. They called and got the supply company, whoever works with them, you know, these things that they use, those plastic shields that they use in demonstrations. They had about 15 of them, and the officers managed to engage. They moved in on the man with the machete, went behind the shields, got to drop the machete. They put the handcuffs on him, and then they took him away to the hospital. We could do that in the U.S. because we have those shields. They use the same shields that we use for demonstrations. They moved in on him, got him in the middle, pinned him down, and he was standing up. He just couldn't move because they had the shields on him. Took the machete from him, took him in the handcuffed him, and took him to the hospital. We could do that here in this country. We don't have to kill people. And I brought that up. I brought that example to for the interview so that people could see it, because they had sent it to me, and so I arranged at the station that I could show it while we were talking about it. And it just left people. It left somebody there from the law enforcement community, and it just left him with his mouth gap wide open. But see, you're right, Donnie. See, we need to think about these things. There are things that we could do, and we don't do it. Because whatever it is that however we've been conditioned to do it, then that's what we fall for right away, rather than to think about how the ending of the situation could be a very different ending and save a person's life.
Okay, Christine.
Yep. Hey, everybody.
Good. Okay. What we got going?
All right. So I had a couple earlier comments about the crisis intervention training. Ruby and Gil says, I was going to ask about crisis intervention training because I am aware that such training is supposedly provided in St. Louis County PD. However, the same over-policing and brutality concerns exist in the county. As such, the average citizen is left to conclude that LEOs simply refuse to exercise CIT protocols for various reasons, for example, racism, implicit bias, raw fare, lack of any semblance of humanity, or simply power trips. And I think you mentioned that a little bit about, you're trained, but that if you don't use it for 2 years, it's like hard to remember. But if you have any other comments regarding that.
Yeah, so that's interesting. When we do talk about, we have policies that are put into place that talks about crisis intervention and how it is that you should attempt to de-escalate situations. We have training that is being supplied. Some training is always can be better. Oh, it always can be better, excuse me. But what departments need to realize, and other officers as well, this includes leaderships and departments, or employees, excuse me, is that culture will eat policy and strategies every day of the week. If you're not addressing the culture, if you're not holding people accountable, if you're not expecting more from them, it's going to continue to thrive. So even though that some people may, because we're not at 100%, 100% of our officers don't have CIT training in St. Louis County. Now the recruits, the new police officers that are coming out, they're automatically, that's incorporated into their training into the academy. So they're getting it as they're coming out. And then we have the training class available for officers that are already there that they can go to. So I've been to a CIT class and an advanced CIT class. So it's available for officers to go on their own. But if you have a certain type of culture of policing that already exists, officers are not going to revert back to their training. They're not going to revert back to their policies. They're going to go to what they feel comfortable with. And that's the culture that already exists. And so that's where you have it. Therein lies the issue. There's very low sense of accountability in police departments when you are needing, whether it be the leadership everywhere from the chief on down to the police officer, everybody needs to be held accountable. If not at one level of rank or all of them, everybody needs to be held accountable. So whomever, I forgot the name, I'm sorry that fast, but whomever made that comment initially, yeah, they're on point. They're on to something there.
Yeah, I want to say something real quick. So when you hear, when someone get killed, when a police officer kills someone, you always hear justified shooting, justified. But I told the chief this also, just because something is justified does not make it right.
That's
You
right.
can justify almost anything. That doesn't make it right. Yeah. Officers need to like that shooting in Philly. If officers would have used, I don't know if they had the training, but if they would have used the training from the CIT that we had, it wouldn't have happened. We're taught in that class not to put yourself in that position. So I don't think that's, I don't know if they made it justified or not, but I don't think it should have never happened. They should never put themselves in that position by the training that we learned from CIT.
Yeah, that's right. I agree.
I like the fact that you made that point about the consistency with which we hear justified. And they do it with no thought of, just that's the immediate go-to response.
Right.
And there's an issue of morality and integrity in that needs to be, addressed, because that should not be our go-to response, that it was justified.
Right.
Justified to whose advantage, to whose benefit.
Right. And a lot of times it's when we talk about, as Sean was saying, that justified, it's like people that read the Bible, they find their favorite scripture and it applies to everything in life. Yeah. And in law enforcement sense, hey, I mean, we can go back way when policies start hitting, and the reason why those policies were put in place was to give them that blanket carte blanche. I often grow tired of hearing I was in fear of my life. If I stand in the middle of the street, if I stand in the middle of King's Highway, guess what I'm in fear of? My life. But that doesn't justify, as Sean would say, me pulling out my gun and shooting at every car that is about to hit me. But if I'm sitting on the sidewalk and I have a reason about a distance, then I can evaluate and deal with the situation, without putting myself in that harm's way. I could go back to the situation in Minnesota where the young man was reaching for his wallet.
Right.
And he says, hey, I'm a conceal and carry holder. And I say, look at the training. We've never been taught to stand in front of someone and ask for their wallet. Because guess what? At some point, you felt comfortable enough to stand in front of somebody, but now all of a sudden you're in fear of your life because you told him to give your license. We got the individual, the trooper that's now in jail in South Carolina. He waited till a guy got out the car and tell him, oh, I need to see your license. So the guy naturally goes in his car to get his driver's license and he shoots him.
Right.
And he's telling him, well, why? And you can hear him in the amount of frustration. Why'd you go back in your car? Well, you asked for my license.
That's right.
You know what? These things that you guys are repeating are things that have been said in the community by a lot of folks. And it makes you wonder, is it a setup?
It's, in each of these cases, I've looked at them. And I mean, it's just, again, we in law enforcement, let me say this, we deal with 10% of the community 90% of the time. The 10% of the community that we deal with is the ones that are doing illegal activity. And we deal with them 90% of the time. So we deal with our everyday citizens, that is the 90%er, we only deal with them 10% of the time. So now we're programmed, if I've had 15 arrests on the corner of Natural Bridge and Kings Highway, my perception is that Natural Bridge and Kings Highway is a bad corner and everybody that hangs out there is bad. And that's not the case. When realistically, we need to start dealing with people on a person-to-person basis, on a situation-to-situation basis. When I teach de-escalation, I always say that first call, even though that may be my 5th burglary for the day, that's that person's first burglary. And so I need to treat it as such and not just assume that, it's they know what to do. I got to understand, understanding our community. Let's be honest. We animated. Somebody breaks into somebody Black's house, they ain't got time to calm down. They upset. They stuff that they worked hard for is gone. And for us to come in and say, I need you to calm down. So nope, you know what? I understand, because my house been broke into, my car been broke into. I done been a victim, and understanding, hey, I know you're a victim. And when you say, hey, you know what? I can relate, get it out your system. And now I can talk to this person. When people, we don't know what's going on right now with this coronavirus, we've had people lose loved ones, people lose jobs. So everyone is on a level of edge that may not have any mental health symptoms, but guess what? They going through a crisis. And we as law enforcement have to understand that when we go on these calls, that they're dealing with some sort of crisis. Because guess what? I don't remember anytime somebody just called 911 and say, hey, I'm having a barbecue. Can the police just swing by to pick up a plate? No, we don't get that call. We don't get that call. But guess what? I would get that call if I know the people in the neighborhood and I talk to them.
That's
and
right.
I don't drive by them like they fish in a fish, in a fish tank.
Right. Right. And so you mentioned earlier about you and Shanette working together, you all both being recruiters in HR. And it made me think about the need for, what are your thoughts about officers needing to be from the community?
I like to say, when I get individuals that call me and they say, well, I grew up in the neighborhood and I am, I want to give back to my neighborhood. And I taught at the academy and I asked them on their last day, when they have my de-escalation class, I say, you've been in the academy 6 months. You've had almost 1,200 hours of training. We didn't taught you to shoot. We didn't taught you all these different things. What kind of asset are you going to be to the community? And they sit there and it's like, well, I want to help my community. Help your community. How? What are you personally going to bring to Walnut Park that first day? What are you going to do different from the other 1,100 officers that's already on the street? And it pauses them. And some of them have to really think about it. And I'm talking both our Black officers and our white officers. I get the white officers say, oh, I can't wait to go up north. Why? Well, that's where the action is. What kind of action?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know that there's a lot of historical landmarks in North St. Louis? Do you know in Fountain Park we have, a statue of Dr. King? And they kind of look at it. I said, before you go up there and thinking everybody got to go to jail, why don't you get to know people first?
Man,
And
I'm having a
deja
vu moment here.
Yeah, Shanette may have something different, but
yeah, I definitely think I would much rather have people from the community. I understand, because you get people that come and they already they understand the geographical area. That's as being a police officer, that's sometimes one of the hardest things when you get a new person in your car. They just don't know where they are. It's like, look, we got to get to go where we're going because people need our help. So that's a plus right there. But just to have somebody that understands the social structures that exist here that keep people down in the first place. We ain't got time to teach you all of this oppression that you didn't have time to learn in your life. Not saying that you can't learn it, but we got stuff. Come on, you got to come over here and work. We ain't got time to sit here and teach you all these different things. You need to come with this certain level of humanity in your style of policing. But before you even apply with us. There's a certain level that you got to come with. And you get that from people that have already been here, that's living the same life that we're living, that's driving down these same roads that we're driving. But, and like I said, I want to make sure I clarify that that's not to say that somebody from outside of St. Louis can't come in and be a police officer. That's not saying that by far. But then at that point, it's upon the police department to make sure that those officers that are coming in, that they're hiring, has a certain level of cultural competency that they probably didn't have before they came here. We have you teaching, or I'm sorry, serving people that are here. That you don't have time to come in and over police what Donnie said. This, you send officers into Black neighborhoods and they sit there to guard and contain, and then you send officers into white neighborhoods and they sit there to serve and protect. We don't have time for these inequities. You need to come here and make sure you know what it is that you're doing. And if you're not equipped to do what you need to do, then we're gonna give you the training, but it's also upon you to be a decent human being. And if you're not, this ain't the job for you.
How are officers when they go through the academy, they graduate, and you assign them to a particular precinct or what have you? How are they introduced to the community?
Well, they have what's called a field training officer, and a field training officer is with, in the city, girl, we go with that divide line. In the city, they're with their field training officer for like 12 weeks. Depending on who they have as a field training officer will depend on how they interact with the community. If they have a field training officer that all he likes to do or she likes to do is write tickets, the majority of their training is going to learn how to write tickets. If they got that field training officer who is one of those, hey, let's run and gun and chase everything that move, that's what they're going to learn. So they never really get that balance. That is what I believe is needed. When I came out as a police officer, I had an excellent FTO that gave me a balance. I mean, he gave me a balance, and I was on night watch. And I'm like, I didn't even think I could meet people at 3 o'clock in the morning, but you do. And so it's, when you got a field training officer, it's hard to get that officer that's balanced today. And when it comes to field training officers right now, with our department being so young, we don't have the veteran that's like Sean, for instance. Sean, 20 plus years, would make an excellent field training officer, but his path took him a different route to where he does more the admin stuff.
Okay.
And so those officers are now left to the hands of a field training officer who may only have 3 or 4 years on. And guess what? They're still learning the job.
Right.
So, a lot of that needs to come back to the sergeant making sure that officer is balanced to a community. We need, what I feel that should happen in some of our academies, realistically, I feel that they should have community service hours. We do it in high schools. Why not in the academy? They have to go to, they have community service hours.
Yeah,
The
that's
city,
why I asked about the introduction piece. Like, where do they get to spend time learning the community, meeting the people, not while they in uniform, but really become a part of that community that they're going to be serving, and letting the people in that community get to know them.
that's usually here what we get. This year we missed the Annie Malone parade where
Yeah.
all the recruits walk and everybody cheers, and that's like, they're seeing them.
Okay.
They do one community project before they graduate the academy, but again, it's one community project. Yeah, what we have in the state of Missouri, they only have to have 600 plus hours to sit for their post license. Our department, as well as St. Louis County, there's an additional 600 hours of departmental training to go with that. So there's 1,200 hours of training. But I can say for some of our administration, prior to the chief becoming chief, they wanted to figure out a way to reduce that 1,200 hours to get them out on the street faster. And when I was at the academy, and it was like, wait a minute, we don't need to reduce the hours. but that's what they try to look for as far as reducing the hours to get them on the street faster. And again, if you get matched up with a FTO or a training officer who is not balanced, then what you're going to have is an imbalanced officer until a supervisor catches it. But if you have an imbalanced officer, he works for an imbalanced sergeant who works for an imbalanced lieutenant, you may end up with a whole imbalanced platoon. And guess what? That imbalanced platoon may be in the 5th district. And you may have a balanced platoon in the 2nd district. So, it's just that type of it's things that's honestly beyond my control and the control of the Ethics Society. We can't, it's only so much we can touch and put into perspective.
Right.
Okay, Christine, any other questions?
Okay, yep, I'm back. This was regarding mental health services. Kim Regan says, I have advocated for mandatory, so there is no stigma, decompression/talk sessions for all officers now and then. Any people under that much stress need that. And then a follow-up to that is from Randy McElrath. I hope I said that right. She asks, what are your thoughts on requiring all law enforcement officers being mandated to speak to mental health counselors every quarter?
Yes, well, excuse me.
Yeah, I don't know what their time frame should look like, but absolutely, there should be mandatory psych evaluations for police officers. Absolutely, that's easy.
What they do now, though, they come up and sit at the station at a desk and say, if you need us, come talk to us in front of everybody. Who's gonna, so.
But I mean, our department as well as St. Louis County, they have a mental eval that they have to do to get on the department. Right. And guess what? There's nothing after that. And I mean, our department as well as St. Louis County has probably disqualified folks because they say, oh, they're not, they're high risk. That's what we've been terming it. They're too high risk to be a police officer. If you was to give half these police officers a evaluation,
everybody got to go.
Right, everybody got to go. So I think the mental evaluation should be annually, just like our department. We have a performance appraisal where we test the gas mask. We have a optional PT, and we got to do our own self-evaluation and then evaluation of our supervisor. Personally, I think there should be a mental health evaluation during our annual, because maybe some officers during that annual will say what's bothering them. Yeah. In privacy, instead of, like Sean was saying, instead of having them at a table, come talk to me. Then everybody's looking at you like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
Well, I took advantage of it. I'm not ashamed. So if anybody watching this right now, any police officers, I took advantage and it helps. So I'm not ashamed to say.
And I have too. That's why when I created de-escalation from the job, because after 15 years, my pot was overflowing. And I really felt depression. I was in the academy. I was not on the street. I was in the academy. But everything I seen, being on the SWAT team, I was part of the carnage and the body scene at ABB. I remember my first dead baby, and all of those things bothered me, but I kept it bottled up from not only my coworkers, but even my family. And I felt the pressure until I started really talking to someone and talk to somebody about it. I felt better. And it's what I've found out, it's talk therapy. And that's when I created de-escalating from the job and helping officers feel comfortable with saying, hey, you know what, my pot, or excuse my French, my shit ain't together and I need to talk to somebody. And it's not always, we have had in the past, and Mr. Hampton can contest to this, after a bad scene, it's let's go get a drink. Yeah. And that's where the alcoholism comes into play. So when the alcoholism, so now this officer has seen something like ABB, he or she gets drunk, They go home, there's your domestic. So
Yeah. See,
Yeah,
and
that's
this is all the more the reason why we need to be concerned about rightly dividing the resources where everybody can get help and serve. Because, you know, if you have instances where you may have officers who are really facing some significant challenges, you don't want them on the street. You don't want to send them out to a car where it could become deadly. And yeah, I thank you all for sharing those examples. I think Christine, any others?
Sorry, I keep forgetting to unmic myself or unmute myself. Yeah, so just one more comment. Ruby N. Gill says, can a panel such as this collaborate to develop an in-depth comprehensive plan to present to appropriate officials for buy-in to a pilot program? And I guess I guess now that I'm looking through it, I don't know exactly what she was referring to. Oh, I think this was in reference to getting people engaged in the community. We were talking about that maybe midway through the conversation.
Yeah, and I think there have been several people who have been engaged in the community. Many of those people we've mentioned here before that represent other smaller communities. At some point, you're gonna need the policymakers, the legislators, the chiefs, the mayors to get off their butt and on their feet and do something. And you need the right people in there. I didn't want to cuss like some of the other people saying get off your ass and on your feet, but you need to come on up and you need to you have people that are crying out and saying the things that need to be done. There's a number of different things that the ethical society can call out all day long. There's a number of things that we can put pressure on people to do. And that pressure only goes so far. Our pressure only goes to the people who it can only be applied to the people who honestly give a damn. And there's a lot of people out there who don't give a damn. And they just truly don't, whether they be self-proclaimed liberals, whether they be the Democrats, the Republicans, whomever, whatever, in the Green Party, whatever. There's a lot of people out here who just don't care. And so now things need to go to the next level. And so it is good to make sure that we have those structures. So, you know, we can come out and we can have these conversations and we can come up with pilot programs if you want it. By no means am I trying to come down on the question, but we've had a number of conversations. We've had so many conversations to the point where I've had conversations to where my mouth hurts from talking so much. While we're still talking and having conversations, we're still having an incident in Philadelphia. While we're talking and having conversations, we still have an incident that happened again in Ferguson. While we're talking and having conversations, we have incidents here, and here. At what point are we going to stop having conversations and we're going to put some of this stuff into action? And I don't mean to sound like I have low patience or anything like that, but a lot of this comes up on state level. We can call out Missouri Post, our Department of Public Safety. Missouri Post falls up in the Department of Public Safety. If anybody is still listening at this point, I encourage all people to contact your state representative and have them speak on your behalf to go and make sure they can change some different things from Post. Post mandates the standards and the training for 16,000 police officers in the state of Missouri. Have those conversations with them. Make them have mandated training as it relates to implicit bias, to racial profiling, more than just an hour of what they do right now, because that's what they think of it. So we need these things to keep on going, but we got to put some action steps into place, right? I enjoy the conversations. I mean, we can have conversations all day. I get off at 4 o'clock. We can talk it all you want, but at some point, we're going to have to start doing some stuff. We need some folks to write some letters. We need some folks to do some things, all of that.
And those are the strategy points that we should be talking about at this point in the segment of the show, because I had a placeholder for that. Like, what are the next steps? Because Ron didn't do this for nothing, and we don't plan on just talking. And maybe we need to be bringing different kind of folks to the table, like the community push it. But we're going to have to probably teach them how to push things forward.
Of course.
You know, but it cannot be driven by the policymakers and the legislators and the aldermen. It cannot be driven. It's got to be community driven.
It does.
It does have to be community driven, but when the community driving is bus, you got to have the people that make this road for the people for the community to even drive this bus home. And so if this is a bumpy road or a road doesn't even exist, where's the community supposed to go? So I'm not trying to put it off on anybody, not speaking in justifications, but just explanations of this is how the things go. We can talk about this all day, but we need to mandate and force people to act right, because people don't do it out the kindness of their heart.
Right.
And to piggyback off of Shanette, and she talking about Missouri Post, and it's the one thing about Missouri Post is that we have no one representing the St. Louis area that sits on the Post Commission. We have these issues in St. Louis, but we have no one from the city of St. Louis or county that sits on the Post Commission. The Post Commission right now has the majority of their, I guess you could say, their policymakers come from Kansas City and Springfield. And the last time Springfield had a major incident that we know about, I couldn't tell you. But St. Louis, with what we've had, and Shanette and I have been really pushing to get on that board. I've been teaching de-escalation since 2014, before the governor came down and mandated be taught to all academies. I've done interviews, I've done all these different things. I'm trying to get on the Missouri Post Commission as, you know, the subject matter expert for de-escalation, because if nothing else, I can help write that policy to where it is a section for our mental health. It is a section for our domestics. It's, you know, I could take all of those things that we have the problems here in St. Louis area, including the county, and let it be known, you know, like I said, Shanette and I have been standing on top of each other and screaming that we need to be a part of this conversation. But this is where we need the community to start reaching out to their alderperson and their state representatives to say, hey, why aren't we represented on a state level when it comes to things that's going on in St. Louis? We have no representation. You know, we go up as far as the Ethical Society and we try to fight for, you know, different things, but we need to be on that Post Commission. They're making policies, like Shanette says, there's 1 hour racial profiling every 3 years. 1 hour. 1 hour. And guess, you know what? And when let's look at racial profiling,
It's every year. Every year.
You said what now?
It's an hour every year.
An hour a year. Okay, so 1 hour every year. 1 hour of racial profiling a year, and it's usually such a watered down version of racial profiling that I can't even justify it as racial profiling. And guess what? I'm certified to teach racial profiling. And, you know, I get into understanding our different communities. And I'm not just saying our Black community. The St. Louis area has a huge Bosnian community. St. Louis County has a huge Mexican community. But yet we don't touch those. We don't get into a lot of our areas that we patrol and the issues that are in these areas.
Ron, it's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, it is. How do you get I wanted to ask the brother, how do you get appointed to the post? Who appointed who to the post?
Well, the way it's set up is when there's a vacant seat is when, you know, you can apply. But here on this side of I could say the eastern part of Highway 70, we never know when there's a vacant seat.
You don't have to do a public announcement or anything?
No.
I'll let you know. I found out. So it's 11 spots on the Post Commission. Out of those 11 spots, there's about 8 of them that are either vacant or expired. Out of all of those 11 spots. Therefore, they got room for some of those people to come off and some new folks to come on.
So the
governor who, I'm probably not going to get any cool points for this, but our governor who was a main supporter of Trump and probably didn't even see very much need for police reform on a lot of different things. You're appointed by the governor.
No, what I was going to ask, is the governor responsible for making those appointments?
You have to be appointed by the governor.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Wow. And Do they have any citizen representation?
No.
None?
Yeah, so the way that it's made up, there are stipulations that are put into place. So there's spots that are out of all of the spots on there. There's some of the spots that are made just for chiefs of police. There's some spots that are made just for the rank of patrol officer and sergeant. There's some spots that are available for a civilian, if you will. No more than 2 people can come from like one congressional district unless the one is the civilian and law enforcement. Like there's a number of different stipulations that's put into place for it.
Okay.
Well,
11 spots and 8 are vacant or expired.
Yes.
That means you got 3 people running stuff right now on post?
Well, no, they're all on there. They're all still on there. It's just like, that there's a number of different people that are on there who are expired. It's a 3-year term. So there's people that are still on there that are expired. And then there's a couple vacancies. So it's not full to its capacity. But there's a number of people on there whom their terms are expired.
Okay. All right. So we're way past our time. And I think I'm going to end it there. Do we have any other questions, Christine, that we just have to ask? No?
No, I think we covered the bulk of them.
Okay. All right, great. Any closing comments or remarks? Ron, I'm sorry, go ahead, Shanette.
No, I was just gonna say, I think we covered quite a bit. Thank you for having us, for sure.
You're welcome. Thank you for agreeing to be with us.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak on, with my counterparts here.
Okay. Thank you for being here.
I just want to say thank you. And just because it's justified doesn't make it right.
Thank you. Thank you. Ron, any closing remarks?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I want to thank you for setting this up. And, I've been having listening to them, I'm having some deja vu moments, some of the moments that take me back to 1971 and 1972 and 1982. I retired in 1994. I've been privy to those remarks all along. They never have things. So there's a saying that goes on in the community that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And this is evidence that is the case, but it don't have to be that way. And even though some things have changed, we've been able to sort of be in a place to initiate those changes. So we can't give up. If I somehow never had adopted that attitude a long time ago, I wouldn't have never got to this place. And believe me, I've seen some good things and I've seen some bad, and I still continue to see some good and bad. But I'm not going to give up because we can do better. And so again, I'm making myself available, and I think that we can have the conversation with the community and just see exactly what it is. And I look forward to working with you all. I can't imagine a brighter group of young people to work with. Because they like they say so often now, they are spot on. They are definitely on top of what it is that's going on, and they know what this stuff is all about. So I'm looking forward to working with them. The first time I get a chance when this virus somehow or another is reduced, if that ever happens, I'm looking forward to coming to St. Louis and spending some time, and you all can take me around and introduce me to some of the communities and get a chance to talk to some people and then really see what the possibilities are in terms of getting our community up to snuff and to a place where they're in more control of the kind of issues that impact their life, because that's just natural. That's what people want. So I look forward to that. And Elaine, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I look forward to the next one. The more we talk about it, the more we get people involved, the more we empower them about the process of what it is that's happening in the community. Because people want to be in control. They want to be in control of the issues that impact their life. I know that.
Right. Community control. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for agreeing to do this. I know everyone's had a full day, and you've come on and spent almost 2.5 hours with us.
Yeah.
So the conversation has been so rich though and substantive. And many of you all, this is your first time meeting me. Typically, I don't do one-offs. I'm always looking for ways to continue the conversation and move it into action. I'm a project manager by training. So, there are 5 cycles in project management. As you talk about the design and planning, implementation, execution and monitoring, controlling and replication. We're going to do all of that. We just have to figure out what our next moves are. And I will be communicating with each one of you in the group on email. And we'll talk about what our next steps should be. You got to keep the ball moving. This is not just a conversation, okay? And for those of you who joined us on our Facebook show page, as well as the show page, Facebook show page of Real STL News, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I want each one of you who are in St. Louis to understand that we are serious. We need your help. We need your participation. We need your engagement, involvement. We need your eyes and ears so that we can move past the complaining and the whining and the griping and saying that we took control of our community and did it hand in hand and working with ESOP, working with Mr. Ron and even the police officers. We got to find a way to do this because we're losing too many of our people. And as you saw earlier this evening, when we presented the data, those numbers are high for domestic issues as well as mental health. We have got to shift and reduce the footprint of the police and communities and help you guys find ways to seek out alternatives than calling the police for everything, because we're losing people because of interactions that shouldn't have never happened. Again, thank you so much for joining the Justice Beat Talk Show. We'll see you for our regularly scheduled Saturday morning 10 a.m. show this Saturday. God bless you and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And good,
Bye-bye.
good night. Good night.
Night.
Thank you for listening to the Justice Beat. If you like what you heard and found the information useful, then support the Justice Beat radio show by spreading the word and telling a friend.